space, says the introduction to the Hitchhiker's Guide, is big. Really big.
Hey guys, my name's DocJade. Welcome back to Factorio Space Age. Today we are tackling Fulgora. A few things before that though, we need to research how to get there and fix Vulcanus' oil production. I'll fly over and start researching liquefaction. Once I had my pants on, I started making big mining drills while I waited for coal liquefaction to research. The big drills might be useful on other planets, so it wouldn't hurt to make just a few. Then I'll steal the auto mall from Navis to put on Vulcanus, just in case I need to fix more stuff remotely later. Now that coal liquefaction is done, let's tear down the old setup. Then I'll tile the new recipe, kickstart it, then finish researching Fulgora. With crack production hitting epidemic levels, petroleum output has increased dramatically, but plastic production is still particularly subpar. Petroleum could possibly be improved, but it'll be fine for now. I'll launch up those big mining drills, then once the rockets were set back to automatic mode, they stopped sending materials up. Turns out, FedEx was full, and the drills I had shipped up there were spilled onto the ground. At least I didn't lose them. After finishing the auto mall, up I go, and we'll start flying to Fulgora. The solar power in space drops off pretty heavily as I approach Fulgora, but a couple solar panels later, let's head down. Well, there's not much here, is there? There is lightning, though. The tips and tricks say lightning happens more frequently during the night, and solar power barely works here. As for resources, there aren't any ores, but there is scrap, and the oceans are made of heavy oil. But we can collect electricity using lightning rods, which we'll have to store in accumulators. The lightning rods quickly dissipate the electricity they collect, so we need to pull the power out of them with accumulators as quickly as possible. From FedEx, I'll ship some resources down. Then we can go exploring. Walking outside the range of the lightning attractor here puts an icon on me, warning me that I might get hit by lightning. I should bring this with me, but mining it turns it into scrap. After walking to the nearest island as fast as I could, I'll clean up all the ruins, but leave the attractors alone. There's a lot more lightning during the night. Mining the ruins makes quite a bit of scrap, along with some other random items like gears. Cleaning up did take a while though. Personal solar panels are practically useless on Fulgora, so I had to do most of the work by hand. The lightning flashes were hurting my eyes a little bit, so I turned them off in the graphics settings. With all the ruins cleaned up, I'll store all the random items, then place some big mining drills on the scrap patch. To use the scrap, we need to process it in the recycler, which we can unlock by finding and mining a Fulgorian vault ruin, which I have not seen yet. Luckily, there's one on the island below where we spawned. One long right click later, that's the recycler, which is made of steel, gears, blue circuits, and concrete. Recycling scrap gives us quite the mix of items, including ice and holmium ore. The most common item is gears, which is a 1 in 5 chance. I didn't bring any blue circuits with me, so I'll have to recycle scrap by hand until I get enough to make a recycler. While I was doing that, I got some holmium ore, which unlocked holmium processing. You can turn the holmium ore into holmium solution with stone and water, which then can be turned into holmium plates. We'll work on holmium later. For now, let's focus on scrap processing. With a recycler in hand, we have no way to power it. Time to make a lightning rod, which needs steel, copper wire, and bricks. We'll have to smelt some bricks with an electric furnace, but I didn't bring a single iron plate to Fulgora with me, so I'll have to use substations instead of medium power poles. A couple very slow bricks later, our first lightning rod starts collecting lightning for us. The recycler is pretty simple. Item goes in, ingredients come out. They're decently fast too. Once lightning started hitting the rod, looks like I'm able to pull around 8 megajoules from each lightning strike. More energy storage and rods later. Time to convert all the scrap I gathered into useful items. I needed more iron plates for accumulators, but making them out of gears hurt my soul a little bit. With the recycler unlocked, making quality items starts to make a lot more sense. This setup makes regular accumulators, and each time it makes a non-quality item, we'll recycle it back into 25% of its ingredients and try again. Building things by hand is wearing me out though, so I'll start researching the portable fission reactor to replace my personal solar panels. Big mining drills mine scrap very fast, so we'll only need a couple of them. Once the nuclear backpack was researched, we'll need to send 4 uranium fuel cells over from Navis to make one. As usual, it takes a bit for FedEx to deliver, but there's the reactor. Time to build proper scrap processing. Using logistic spots would make recycling almost trivial, but that's not fun, so I'll do something else. Sushi would work pretty well, but that also feels like a cop-out, so instead, I'll use splitters to filter out each item onto its own belt. There's always going to be an excess of the more common items like gears, so using an inserter for each belt, we can pull off the excess items and recycle them a second time. Since every time you recycle something, you only get 25% of its ingredients, endlessly recycling the extra items will eventually destroy them and clear up any clogs. but I will have to expand the splitters to handle the new items that recycled recycling produces. Then I'll check all the items into limited storage chests. I would load the train directly, but there's not enough room to move the belts around. Wait, train? Yup. Since the islands are pretty small, building science from scratch on one island isn't really feasible. Using elevated rails, we'll cross the heavy oil ocean. Then on each island, we'll make a single item and move items between the islands with a train. A very dangerous stroll later, there's another decently sized island to our south right. I'll start making the rails and refine concrete for the elevated rails. The accumulator crafter has been continuously creating quality accumulators, which I've slowly been replacing the regular ones with. One rail ramp later, down goes the double-headed train, which I'll disaffectionately name Scrappy Doo. The right wagon of Scrappy will be filled with crafting ingredients, and the left wagon will be used for delivering loads of scrap. I did consider using sushi for loading the train instead of using bots, but I was worried it might clog while I was away, so bots it is. With rails and rail supports in hand, I'll head over to the spawn island, which takes a slightly weird path, since supports can't be placed on the deep ocean tiles. Wait, that's not an island. After making my way up here instead, there's a ton of room up here. Probably enough room to build a regular base instead of doing it with trains. But doing individual stations sounds like more fun, so I'll stick with that. The island that we've already put together will be dedicated to just processing scrap. In fact, we won't even mine it here. One optimal rail to connect the train later, we'll unload the train directly into recyclers, then load the other wagon with the results. I'm not sure how much of each item I'll need, so I'll just guesstimate. We'll need more logistics robots though, so I'll ship in some more electric motors from Navis. Except, Navis is in a rocket fuel shortage. Easy fix though, petroleum was backed up, so I used it for solid fuel instead of light oil. Rocket, rock, and one train stop. We'll launch our rockets from the spawn island later. Time to get more scrap. There's a patch on the big island, and we'll mine directly into the wagon. Even with only 4 big drills, it's pretty fast, but keeping them powered is tricky. With the scrap scrapped successfully, back to processing. I plan on Scrappy Doo being our only train, so being able to process the scrap as fast as possible is our top priority. Right now, it's way too slow, but since scrap processing makes red and green circuits, making modules is practically free. But even with 4 speed modules apiece, it's still too slow. Using the same quality setup as before, we'll make recyclers. Then we'll recycle the recyclers if the recycler is of normal quality. Then we'll use the recycled ingredients of the recycled recycler to make more recyclers. And I must be very lucky, since I got 2 uncommon recyclers in a row. Quality recyclers in hand, including a rare one, turning trash into treasure seems to be reasonably fast now, but we will need some more power. Using lightning as our only power source actually seems viable. The inserters that load the train keep getting clogged, so I hook them all together to blacklist items that are already being inserted. Hopefully that'll fix it. More logistics spots later, I'll add holmium ore to the train, which we'll set up next. Making holmium plates will unlock the electromagnetic plant, which we'll take a look at right after we unlock it. An assembler for the holmium plates and a chemical plant for the solution later. There it is. The electromagnetic plant is made of steel, blue circuits, quite a few holmium plates, and refined concrete. Checking the Factoriopedia, it can make quite a few wire and circuit related items, along with the electromagnetic science pack. To unlock the science pack, we'll need to make a supercapacitor. Let's make one of the plants and take a look. Like the foundry from Vulcanus, the electromagnetic plant has a 50% base productivity bonus. Pair that with being able to make modules, these seem pretty powerful. Speaking of the foundry, we can use it to cast holmium plates for that sweet 50% productivity bonus. Only issue is, you can only craft foundries on Vulcanus, so using bots for deliveries, I'll make some. While waiting on those to craft, I'll build a station up here for holmium processing. Getting over there is a slow process though, since I need to protect myself from lightning. Good stuff. 33 foundries later, I'll send FedEx over to Vulcanus, ship them up, then down to Fulgora. A couple chemical plants for the solution, then I'll cast the plates, which is wicked fast. With the plates ready to be loaded, next up is the supercapacitors for electromagnetic science. Supercapacitors take superconductors as an ingredient though, so those are up first. Copper, plastic, holmium, and light oil. I'll need a few more electromagnetic plants. The plants have fluid pass-throughs on them, which will make tiling them nice and easy. An offshore pump for heavy oil, and ice melting for water later. Now we just need the item ingredients. One scheduling adjustment later. The train is reversed, driving backwards from the holmium station swapped what side the wagons are on. A quick copy and paste later though, I'll let the train back out to pick up more ingredients. But since it didn't drive backwards back through the junction that turned it around, Scrappy Doo pulled into scrap processing backwards, and the recyclers dutifully got to work, recycling the wrong wagon. After flipping the train back, adjusting the schedule, and removing the junction, the train gets loaded back up, then makes the worst delivery ever. Once it came back, we'll unload the ingredients and start making superconductors, which craft quite quickly. With those on hand, now for the supercapacitors. Well, not quite yet. One of the scrap drills is out, so I added more. But the inserters on the train loader keep getting clogged as well, so I had to move each item into a separate requester chest. Okay, now for the supercapacitors. Those take electrolyte, which you make in a mag plant with stone, heavy oil, and holmium solution, which is interesting. If I was doing a normal base, I would probably put solution on the bus. With heavy oil plugged in and the solution solved, we start making what electromagnetic plants crave. A few belts and pipes later, there's our first supercapacitor and electromagnetic science. The science takes the previously mentioned supercapacitors, accumulators, fruit punch Gatorade, and holmium solution. Once batteries were on the train, I headed north to make rocket fuel. We still need to launch rockets out of here, so we'll put production up here. Recycling scrap does make solid fuel, which we could use to make rocket fuel, but I'm not using it here because I forgot. The rail is getting pretty long, and going to rocket fuel production every trip would waste a lot of time. So using the new interrupt system on Scrappy-Doo, we can set up an interrupt every time we stop at the supercapacitor station. If we don't have any rocket fuel, the interrupt will run and add rocket fuel to the train's schedule. Completely unrelated, Navis is out of production science due to a lack of stone. Looks like the stone patch ran dry. Luckily, I planned ahead for this. We already get stone delivered from Vulcanus, so a couple requester chests should do the job nicely. Back to electromagnetic science, I'll put it right above the scrap mine to reduce travel time. The entire time I've been on Fulgora, I haven't been hit by lightning a single time. I almost feel like I'm missing out on it, so I stood here and waited for a while. I never got hit, but that makes sense. Have you seen me drive a train before? I'm a pretty bad conductor. Before we can finish the science, we'll need accumulators, which I'll squeeze in right here. Doing them directly off of the train works well, but if you have a station that you only occasionally go to, you should have a buffer. Now we need the electrolyte and glitter glue for the science. One long pipe for heavy oil, ice melting, and stone later, there they are. Getting the fluids into the science is a bit wacky, since there isn't a pass-through to tile with. With the plant sufficiently hydrated, we'll feed in the supercapacitors and accumulators with this belt. Since the science takes a couple weird items, I decided to deliver here using interrupts like we did with rocket fuel. Actually, might as well replace all of the stations with interrupts, so Scrappy-Doo will take the shortest trips possible. With the interrupt setup, when the train finishes scrap processing, it triggers the scrap pickup interrupt, and once we're done loading scrap, it will trigger holmium processing if we have all the ingredients on hand, and so on. Once it had enough materials to make science, Scrappy-Doo headed over, and that's electromagnetic science. The production is heavily bottlenecked by holmium solution, but we should be able to ease the pain with a few productivity modules. Now let's get the science out of here. I already had all the ingredients for a rocket silo on hand, which we'll put right above the rail on the aptly named Rocket Island. Using a single combinator, I'll unload the items from the train into these passive provider chests, the amounts of which are set in the constant combinator. A few base tweaks later, including using rocket fuel instead of solid fuel for Scrappy-Doo, I set up one more electromagnetic plant, which with a couple circuit conditions will turn our excess red and green circuits into blue circuits, and make more red circuits with the extra plastic. A handful of bots for rocket loading later. We would ship the science to Navis if FedEx wasn't completely full of items. Since I also use FedEx to deliver base materials to Navis from Vulcanus, it ends up with quite a lot of stuff in it, so there's no more room to fit the new science into. We can expand the storage space with more cargo bays, but since everything is packed together so densely, adding more bays would require a complete redesign. I could build another platform for science delivery, but I think it would be more fun to have one massive platform that handles everything. So I started tearing down FedEx. Speaking of fun, let's throw all design considerations and common sense out of the window and build a platform that just looks cool. Try to guess what I'm drawing. Got it? Perfect. You aren't allowed to have any holes in your space platform, so I had to add a couple gaps, but overall it still looks pretty good. With the foundation set, building the rest of the platform on top is going to be quite the challenge, especially with these narrow spaces on the sides. As usual, turrets go up front for defense, and thrusters go in the back. Thankfully, there's no penalty for building lopsided thrust, so all of the thrusters will go on the right side. On top of having limited space, underground pipes also don't work if there's empty space between the undergrounds, which makes sense, but it does make routing things a little bit weird. With the tanks in place, time to make the liquids, which I'll need to design pretty carefully, since I need to maximize space for the cargo bays. I wanted to insert the ice into these chemical plants in line, but red belts aren't long enough. I'll research blue and green belts, although I ended up not using them. The research didn't research though, since we're still out of stone production for science, and now that FedEx has been repossessed, we can't ship any more in. The nearest stone patch on Navis is a short jaunt northwest, and I'll slowly make my way over there with roboports surrounded by laser turrets while I keep working on the platform. Instead of directly inserting items from the cargo hub to make fuel and oxidizer, I'll use a tiny sushi belt to bring the carbon and iron down. Fulgora is out of scrap. Crap. I thought this patch to our east was 33,000 scrap, so I had ignored it. Turns out, it's 33 million scrap, which is way bigger than any other patch nearby. With the large mining area of the big mining drills, this patch will, hopefully, last for the rest of the run. The bots are almost done enclosing the stone patch on Navis, so I'll mine it and plug it in. While I was upgrading the stone belt, I realized I had placed the stone requester chests onto the copper belt. And because of that, the entire base slowly choked to death on stone bricks. No wonder it wasn't making any science. Instead of fixing it, back to the space platform. The fuel and oxidizer are all set up, now it just needs the fluid ingredients. But before that, the turrets are going to need a lot of ammo. In goes the belt, then I'll pack enough electric furnaces up here to feed 2 assemblers for yellow ammo production. Now for the asteroid collectors. I tried to space them out as evenly as I could along the front and side of the platform, but we probably still won't be able to keep up with the iron demands of the ammo while moving. So we'll need to stockpile the ammo before every trip. But chests don't work up here, and I'm not going to waste storage space in the hub. A long space-filling belt should do the trick though. Time for crushers, and since we have the new asteroid reprocessing recipe, we can take a slightly different approach. All of the collected asteroid chunks will be fed into these splitters to sort them out, then split with priority onto the output belt, which I'll use circuit conditions to limit. The excess chunks will then be fed into crushers to reprocess them into other types. So if we have a major imbalance of one type of chunk, we can turn it into the other chunks we need. No need for circuit conditions on this side, we'll just loop the output back into the input. And since the asteroid reprocessing recipe is a tad lossy, it shouldn't clog. Oh yeah, somebody should clean up those bricks. With the chunks sorted and counted, we'll crush them up here and use belt readers to make a preset amount of each item, which can be easily tweaked with the A combinator. All of the leftover space on the platform will be filled with solar panels and accumulators to power everything. Then I'll set up 3 more inserters to eject items from the loop, just in case. After a couple more belt readers to keep track of how much ammo we have stockpiled, the platform is done. Say hello to the guide. Let's head to Fulgora for our first delivery. We moved pretty quickly at first, around 100 kilometers a second, but the fuel buffers quickly ran out and we ended up averaging about 20. I should have built more fuel production. Although, these lower speeds are a lot easier for the turrets to handle. I did forget about Fulgora's lack of solar power though, so I'll need to put efficiency modules and everything later. On Fulgora, up goes our first deliveries. We don't need low density structure or blue circuits here, so we can ship it all up for use on other planets. While building more accumulators to power the rocket, I walked directly into the train and died for the first time. I was pretty nervous to respawn, since I didn't know where it would put me. Will I respawn on Fulgora, or will I have to fly all the way back from Navis? 10 seconds later, the answer is, you respawn on the same planet you die on. Nice. After robbing my own grave, up goes the science, then I'll launch up the extra machines I had on hand. Big mining drills, foundries, and recyclers too, since you can only craft them on Fulgora. Launching them up is surprisingly expensive. You can only send 10 per rocket. A couple electromagnetic plants and bots later, I'll send myself up. I would head straight to Gleba, but we still need to research it, and it's also locked behind landfill, which I thought was pretty funny. Time for more labs. A little while later, that's Gleba. Let's head over, which takes about 10 minutes, then I launched myself down. Wow, Gleba is very colorful. There doesn't seem to be any resource patches in the immediate area, just a bunch of weird plants. But we'll have to forage those plants next time. I'd like to take a moment to thank my supporters on Ko-fi. Fulgora is pretty interesting. The base I built on it wasn't very big, but with a larger base and a lot of scrap trains, you would be able to crank out all of the materials to make rockets practically for free. At this point, I'm not sure if I would rather go to Vulcanus or Fulgora as my first planet. And that's all for today. My name's DocJade. Bye-bye.